A Safa dream, the scrum to win the game. Watch Peter Steph studs here. In. We're ready. Get low. Put it in. And destroy them. Destroy them. Oh, yes. Rugby. First off, thank you to everyone who came out to Hudson's to hang out with Harry and me before the game on the weekend. Let's do it again sometime. Secondly, there's a lot of international rugby to get through, so let's start with the one in Pretoria. South Africa versus Ireland. How naive. How utterly simple and childish of me to think that the Urk final atmosphere would be hard to beat. By the time the match kicked off on Saturday, I was so worked up I was ready to put my head down in the front row for the box. We had fireworks and music and drikkers and an a cappella anthem. The Boks had rolled out their version of the rugby red carpet and the Irish had accepted the invite. And for the second time in the second Rassie epoch, the Boks scored within the first few minutes of kickoff. Against Wales, it was Muscles, and this time it was the Butcher finishing off a lovely move down the left. The evidence of the 2024 Boks trying to attack with more width was there for all to see. Pullback passes with wraparounds and double flanker pods in the tram lines are all in fashion now, and the return of the sprinting Peter Steph du Toit was enough to bring a tear to my eye. Just like against Wales, it wasn't all slick and perfect, and when you move the ball side to side that much, you do often run out of cleaners or risk an intercept. The Irish stuck more to their known style. Pods and shapes off 9 closer to the ruck kept cleaners on their feet and the ball safe. And once the Bok defense was narrow enough, a bridge ball over the top would go too low for him to try and cause some damage, which he did, for both teams. If it wasn't an incredible offload or two to set up tries, he was obsessed with keeping the ball on the field and giving opportunities to the Boks, which they gladly accepted. That was kind of the story of the match for me. Two teams near the peak of their powers and so evenly matched that their stats were almost identical. In fact, their defensive stats were actually identical. When does that happen? With a game that tight, it was always going to come down to who made a mistake and which player would capitalize. Colby, as ever, chased the lost cause, and Lowe's power helped Osborne and Baird get in. There was only one place really that you could say Ireland were not up to the same standard as the Boks, and that was the replacement front row. Those replacement forwards knew that when the opportunity came, they would have to say screw Tony Brown and his curly baby hair. The big boys dropped their hips and tore through that Irish scrum straight into my heart and straight into a penalty try to win the game. Series loss avoided. The second test in Durban will show us if Ireland can get back up for one last push despite a whole bunch of injuries, and the Boks, having selected the exact same team, will want to flex that bench power once again. International rugby is best rugby. The All Blacks versus England. Before all of that Springbok stuff, Saturday morning saw the Razor World Takeover start a little slowly. Or maybe the Borthwick World Takeover has been growing in front of us this whole time. Either way, the two teams playing were more closely matched than someone with my past trauma expected. England looked more inventive and dangerous with ball in hand for long periods of time than the All Blacks. And young players like Cunningham, South and Freeman and Finn Smith did not look phased at all, which is maybe scary. The All Blacks were made to work very hard to score against an English defence that looks a little familiar, I might add. And the game was in the balance right up until the end. We'll have to wait and see if we get the more traditional second All Black test hammering or the second All Black test reverse that's been more prevalent in recent times. Bring on the weekend. Wallabies versus Wales. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who is this guy? Even if I did have time to watch the Wallabies' first test under Joe Schmidt, I might have switched away thinking I was watching the under-20s. This Wales side seems to be aging backwards, and every game Gatland finds new children to throw at the international rugby meat grinder. At least there were some players old enough to drive in the tight forwards, which kept them in the game. But Wales's kick return defence was bad again, and Tom Wright scored a screamer at 70 minutes to put the game to bed. I can't really say anything else because I was face first in beers and burgers while this game was on. Sorry. More games! My excuse for missing the Argentina versus France game is that I was stuck in a crowd trying to leave the school pavilion they call Loftus for like 40 minutes. Way too many choke points there, guys. I was surprised though that a C squad French team did manage to beat Los Pumas, but the hosts have always started slowly and they might be a little tougher to beat this coming weekend. At least I'll have 2 chances to watch the French play on Wednesday and on Saturday, if they manage to keep themselves out of jail or the headlines until then. Samoa got a surprise win over Italy, until you remember how hard it is for the Super Rugby teams to go to the Pacific Islands and win. Italy will have to do a much better job against Tonga this coming weekend. Scotland beat Canada in North America by a massive 12 points to 73. But Canada did score first, so Kingsley James's coaching career is safe for at least another 11 years, inexplicably. There were a bunch of other international games this week, but I didn't watch any of them and I don't even think they were on TV here, so let's move on to the news. Nice warm laptop. It is so cold. News. And the news is it's Tuesday, so the Springbok team has been announced. As mentioned earlier, it is exactly the same. So, what do we talk about? Maybe Pollard should hit all his kicks, and we should resource our rucks when we do a whole lot of phases, and we should beat the Irish by 40 points to 3. Anyways, bye. I'll see you next week. Mwah. Love ya.
Guys were falling over each other. Hoekom moet hulle dit nie afgesien?
Ek sê maar net voetjies. Dis net 'n crowd.
As jy ons by jou ver kom, kan ons van net sowel staan en wag.
Ja, nee, maar dan.